remarks.
Good afternoon, Tiger. It is really an honor to be here, and it's great to see a full room for this discussion. I want to thank the Tiger Bay Program Committee for the invitation to moderate this conversation. Race is one of the defining issues in our nation's history. To this day, it permeates every part of our culture, our politics, our system of education, where we live and with whom we worship, and how we vote. And even here in beautiful and progressive Pinellas, like most communities in our nation, and particularly here in the South, we are not immune from the legacy and enduring impacts of discrimination and racism. And so an honest discussion on race is really the only path to a mutual understanding of our past, and that in turn will empower us to successfully lay the foundation for equity, shared progress, and prosperity for our future. And so we want to have that honest conversation about race today. I see they turned me up. And that conversation is about our past, our present, and where we move in the future. And to accomplish that, we have four esteemed panelists who will join us today. I'm going to introduce them by name. Y'all can all come up now, and we're going to give you 2 minutes to do a self-introduction. Please hold your applause. But we have with us Ms. Winnie Foster. You never listen when you say hold your applause. And Winnie's going to make her way up. Winnie is a community icon here in Pinellas County, and I won't state her age, maybe she'll state it, but she's doing outstanding. Helping Winnie is one of our great faith leaders and community leaders, Imam Maskia Muhammad Aquil. We have another, hold your applause please. We have another community icon, Ms. Gwen Reese. And finally, we have a newer, fresh set of eyes, but he moved to my mom's neighborhood, a block away on Tree Lane Drive, Mr. Tim Dutton. Now let's give all of our panelists. Yes, ma'am. And while Winnie's coming up, who's sitting on the far right? He is on the far right. Imam Akil, while we're getting situated, if you would start us with up to 2 minutes, just give us your background and why this is an important conversation. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to stand. It gives me a better vantage point for those of you who are in the rear, and I think the same will be true for you. Shalom, Shalom Aleichem, Pax Tikkun, Pax Vobiscum, Assalamu Alaikum. I heard someone respond. I heard you, thank you. Harambe, which means let's all pull together. Uhuru, Uhuru Sasa, freedom now. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, with the name of the one Creator, Lord of all of us. We're very honored to be here with you. I'm going to be very brief. 2 minutes is not nearly enough to tell you about my background. I'm honored to be here. I'm a native of St. Petersburg, born and raised here, raised across the street from Bethel AME Church, a church that was founded in the late 1890s. I remember growing up in that church at one point, and this is relevant to our discussion about race, At one point, a very prominent African-American painter, last name Mr. Dominus, remember him, painted a huge image. I don't know, it seemed like 20 by 30. It filled the space behind the choir stand and the pulpit. And so as a child, up until the time I left and went away to college, we worshiped in that church, and I was born right across the street from it and spent a lot of time there. So every Sunday or whenever we had an activity, I looked up at this huge image, Caucasian image that was supposed to represent Christ Jesus. It said, Isa le Salam. And that had a profound effect on me. Back during the time of segregation, when our world was black and white, everything was segregated. Neighborhoods, schools. I interned with the St. Pete Times. The St. Pete Times was segregated. The newsroom itself was segregated. The publication was segregated. News for Negroes, a colored news roulette, as you call it. We actually helped to desegregate that. I'll tell you something about that later. Later on, as a student at the University of South Florida, when Dr. King was assassinated in 1968, and I'll close with this. We led the movement that resulted in the establishment of the first university-level Black Studies program, which evolved and became the Africana Studies program that's still there to this day. Actually wrote the curriculum, helped hire the first director of that, and had been a student, actually a student of history before that up until this time. One final comment that we'll add, and there are lots of friendly faces here. I don't mind controversy. Frederick Douglass once said, find out the exact amount of injustice that people will submit to, and you'll find out the exact amount of injustice and wrong that will be imposed upon them, and that injustice and wrong will continue until they resist with words and with blows and with blow. And I'd like to say that my history is full of resistance.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Gwen Reese.
I will not stand. My name is Gwendolyn Reese. Namaste. Those of you who know me know that that is my greeting, and it is the divine in me honors and respects the divine in you. My opening statement, I want to make 2 points. I'm also a native of St. Petersburg, 70 years. I've been here born and raised. In my opening statement, there are 2 very important points. One was a question asked to me by my adopted community daughter on the way here, and she said, why are you having that discussion in what would be considered a middle class, upper middle class environment, and in a space where at one time African Americans couldn't even come into this building? And I said, there's been discourse in my community about why you're doing this. I'm doing it because it's an opportunity to have a conversation with a group of people who normally don't have these kinds of conversations. The next statement I'd like to make is a disclaimer. I do not speak for my people. We are not monolithic. If we spoke to 100 of us, we would have differing perspectives and opinions. I can address and enrich this conversation because I am of African descent and I have a shared experience with others who are of African descent. But what I'm sharing with you today is my opinion, my experience, and I ask you not to walk away from here taking my words as the opinion, perspective, and belief of all people of African descent. Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Tim Devlin.
I'll introduce myself by telling you a story. My dad came home from World War II, and the GI Bill was waiting for him. It was waiting for him with opportunity for home ownership. It was waiting for him with an opportunity to go to college. My mom and dad bought a house. They started building family wealth. Well, that was not made available to the 1.2 million black veterans that came home. That happened for reasons that we can spend a lot more time explaining. But, so while my family borrowed money because they had started to build some wealth, my brothers and I went to college. And that didn't happen for many black families as well. So this started a wealth transfer from generation to generation that was not very available in the black community. And it shows up today in the data. Those of you who know me know that I like data. So home ownership in Pinellas County for black families is 35%, and for white families is 69%, which is twice. And it shows up in wealth. The wealth in this country, if you're a black family, is 1/10 the wealth of a white family. So a historian from Columbia says that there was no greater instrument for widening an already huge racial wealth gap than the GI Bill. But it wasn't just the GI Bill. Before it, the Federal Housing Administration, the Social Security Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act, those all had explicit exemptions that kept families of color from benefiting. That prolonged the issue of, continues to be true for an issue of wealth. So the kinds of things that can make a difference are attacking issues that still are persistent policies that continue to create disparities, paying attention to institutional practices, think in terms of how loans are actually made, and things like changing the narrative, which is typically a narrative of blame. So I too appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton. And finally, Ms. Winnie Foster.
Well, I was born on Bastille Day. How many of you know what Bastille Day is? Okay. And that was when the people marched, and I've always thought of that as a signature that people, in order to get justice, had to march. I also was impressed through my faith history, which was as a Quaker. And how many of you know a Quaker town here? Okay, there's a small meeting house in St. Petersburg, and people are still attempting to live up to the faith that Quakers brought in. That was justice for all and action. So those are the themes that I try to live by, but I find it a little more difficult, and I have, now that I'm almost 92, and I've outwitted myself by sitting in my chair, which has my notes in it.
We'll help you get the notes.
And I also wanted to draw your attention to the books that I brought with me today. Tim Weiss, who is a white writer who did the book of White America and his explanations of it. And then, okay, I can sit down now. I can sit, thank you. Okay, here are my notes.
Winnie, you've got just a few seconds left for the introduction, and we're going to move into the questions.
No, I can't read it in 10 seconds.
All right, thank you. Let's hear it for everybody. So let's move into a couple of questions, and then we'll move to questions from the Tigers. The first question is on racial awareness, defined as a recognition of racial, ethnic, and cultural diversity, so recognizing our diversity and a shared understanding of our racial history. and its impact on current and future issues. The question is, how is St. Petersburg as a community in Pinellas County doing in terms of racial awareness? And what do recent conversations, debates about things like green benches and gentrification as it relates to Tropicana Field and the gas plant, the warehouse district and the Deuces, even the CRA, does that indicate a disparity in our level of racial awareness within our community? We'll start with Imam Akil. You have 2 minutes on this.
Allow me to preface my comments by again sharing with you something from my childhood. I'll be very brief. I grew up in Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church. When I went out for entertainment, I went to the Harlem Theater on 3rd Avenue South. If it still existed, it would be right in the midst of Tropicana Field. We went on Saturday to the series and we cheered Tarzan and Jane and the chimpanzee Cheetah and hoped that they would beat the heck out of the Africans. Just think about that, right? And so I changed my name. I have an African name, and my children have African names because it was an awakening moment when I came to realize the world in which we live today is no longer black and white. It is not. There are vestiges of slavery, vestiges of discrimination, Jim Crow, etc. But the world, in fact, is not black and white. We have to accept that reality. Very quickly, case in point, my daughter's just graduated from the IB program at St. Pete High School, and every class was a many United Nations. So their reality is very different from my reality. But again, it's the kinds of systemic and institutional disparities, acts of discrimination, et cetera, we're still experiencing that. Housing, wealth distribution, it could go on and on and on. So yes, there are issues that we have to confront. The issue of some call it gentrification, and there are some vestiges of that, but there's something more than that. Part of what is happening is cyclical in the market. For an example, when I was growing up, we couldn't live west of 34th Street, and we couldn't live in Childs Park, for example. And people were moving out, but now they're moving back in because you have a lot of property values that are there. And then those of us who grew up in segregated black neighborhoods, as those walls of discrimination came down, now they have more choices and freedom as to where we choose to live. And so we find that we're more scattered throughout the city, throughout the county, based upon availability of affordable housing and then the income to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Reese, again, the question is, in terms of racial awareness, how are we doing it as a community as a whole?
And Commissioner, on your question, you sort of gave us a lead, like, well, average or poorly. Well, I would say we're not doing well. I don't think we're doing average, so I'm going to put us right about the category of poorly, because we don't have an awareness. We really don't around the issues of race, and I hesitate to use that word because I don't buy into that categorization of people as a race. But we don't know, and the other part of the question was understanding the history relative to race. Well, most of us don't know the history of the black presence in this community. Not even black people know the history of our presence. If you don't know that history, how can you then relate in an effective way, in a true, open, candid way to the issues about race? We have an African American Heritage Trail here in St. Petersburg. If I ask, and I will not embarrass the room by asking, if I ask how many people have taken a guided tour of that trail, there would be very few hands to go up. Black people have been in this community for 151 years, since 1868. Two of the pioneers of this city, John Donaldson and Elder Jordan, were African American. Yet when I go out and talk to organizations, they're either giving an incorrect history. I've had to correct so many people telling our story, and they don't know our story. So I think the first part of it is to know the history of the people who have been a part of this community for over 151 years. So sadly, I rate it as poorly, but I am hopeful, I'm very optimistic that as we have these conversations, as people come out and take a tour of the trail, as